Okay, so we're diving back into the Chris Hannifin situation. And as you probably know, if you've been following along, the story's taken a bit of a turn.
A significant turn, yeah.
Yeah.
We've gone past the initial stuff about DefendIT Services maybe being a front.
Right. Now it seems like law enforcement is asking questions,
Yeah,
which definitely changes the picture.
absolutely. We already talked about the weird setup of DefendIT, Hannifin suddenly having all this cash,
Hmm.
but police inquiries, that suggests those initial red flags might be pointing to something much more serious.
Exactly. We don't have the exact questions they're asking, but just the fact they're involved. It makes you think, what areas would they likely be zeroing in on?
Well, you have to look at those red flags again, but now maybe through like an investigator's lens.
Like the money.
Yeah, precisely. The sudden wealth, that huge Jayco trailer, the speedboat, the payoff, right? The house in San Antonio, way over asking. We're talking, what, over $1 million in assets pretty quickly.
That kind of spending pattern, especially so fast, must look interesting to anyone looking for illicit funds.
Definitely. And then there's that trip to Mexico with Rudy Reyes, happening right after DefendIT got started. It all paints a picture that, well, probably needs a closer look.
It's not just having the money, it's how and when, right? For someone like Hannifin, coming from roles at NSCG, RSM, Silotech, places with access,
Sensitive access?
yeah, suddenly flashing that kind of cash, it's bound to get attention. So law enforcement could be digging into, well, everything, financials maybe. Are Defend IT's books clean?
Or is the business itself even legitimate? Were they actually doing IT work, cabling, and access points, or was that just cover?
And then the bigger worry, connections to foreign entities, selling sensitive info. That's always been the underlying concern here.
And given Hannifin's background, Air Force time included,
Yeah.
the stakes get higher. It's not just corporate secrets anymore.
Could it be classified government information?
That's the potential fear, yeah, which bumps this right up to national security level. And don't forget Krista Stevens.
Right. She was involved early on with Defend IT, then left suddenly.
Very suddenly. Why? What did she know? Investigators would definitely want to understand that piece.
It really feels like peeling an onion, doesn't it? More layers keep appearing.
Mm-hmm.
And another layer now is silence. We're hearing reports that the big companies involved, RSM, Silotech, NSCG, even Defend IT itself, they haven't given any official replies to reporters.
Yeah, the coordinated quiet is noticeable. What does that usually suggest?
Well, several possibilities, I suppose.
Yeah.
Could be they're running their own internal investigations, trying to figure out what, if anything, happened on their watch.
That makes sense. And legal teams are almost certainly involved, telling them to keep quiet. You don't want to say something that could cause liability issues later.
Or interfere with an official investigation, yeah. Plus, pure reputation management, right? These companies handle incredibly sensitive stuff, government contracts, classified projects.
Exactly. Admitting a potential breach or problem is a huge deal. Sometimes silence feels like the safest bet, short-term at least, to control the damage.
But it also creates this vacuum, Their clients, stakeholders, they must be wondering what's going on. Is their data safe? It can erode trust pretty quickly.
It can. And it's also possible they don't have all the answers yet themselves. This whole Hannifin thing seems to have blown up relatively fast.
Still, it's interesting when you remember those earlier reports. Hannifin apparently trying to poach clients from RSM and people at NSCG mentioning a toxic environment.
Right. It suggests maybe there were signs or at least awareness of some problematic behavior even before this story broke wide open. Were red flags missed earlier? Now, that's a question they might be asking internally, too.
Okay, so let's pivot specifically to Hannifin and Defend IT. With law enforcement now potentially involved, what does that mean for them?
Well, the heat is definitely turned up. If this moves from inquiries to a formal investigation.
Then you're looking at potential charges.
Serious ones. Depending on what investigators find. You could be talking espionage, economic espionage, fraud, mishandling sensitive or classified information. These aren't minor offenses. The consequences for Hannifin, personally, could be severe.
And for Defend IT Services, its whole existence seems questionable now.
It really does.
Yeah.
Is it a real business doing actual work? Or was it, like we speculated, just a shell? A vehicle for selling data?
If it's the latter, its future is, well, non-existent, legally speaking.
Pretty much. And
Yeah.
even if it was set up as a legitimate company doing, industrial cabling, access point management, installations.
Which is what they claim to specialize in.
Right. Even so, with these kinds of allegations swirling, its reputation is likely destroyed. How could anyone in the defense or security sector trust them now?
Especially when you hear warnings, like from the House Committee on Homeland Security about China specifically targeting critical infrastructure.
The Hannifin's company supposedly worked on things like industrial cabling and access points, and potential overlap is concerning, to say the least. Russia or China could use someone like Hannifin to get into critical U.S. systems.
Access secrets, compromised infrastructure. It's a nightmare scenario. It really makes you question how secure things actually are.
It does. It feels a bit like that canary in the coal mine idea. Is this case maybe highlighting deeper weaknesses in how we vet people, monitor access, and the integrity of the companies we trust with sensitive defense information? Ultimately, it impacts everyone if these systems are vulnerable.
It has real-world consequences.
Exactly. Think about cyber attacks on power grids or hospitals. Insider access, especially if state-sponsored, could enable that kind of disruption. It shows how fragile things can be.
Okay, so wrapping this up for now. The key developments are this law enforcement interest adding a whole new level of seriousness and the continued deafening silence from the companies caught up in this.
Right, and massive questions still hang in the air.
Yeah.
What exactly was Hannifin doing? What was DefendIT Services, really? And, crucially, has sensitive or classified information been compromised? If so, where did it go?
Yeah, the national security implications are potentially enormous.
They are.
And that leaves us and you with a final thought to chew on. If these allegations turn out to be true, what does that say about the system? What weaknesses allowed this to potentially happen?
And maybe more importantly, what needs to change? How do we prevent the next potential Hannifin?